it was just like this feeling that I was always being watched. I was always being evaluated, and I was always at risk of disappointing someone. If you allowed yourself to be alone with someone of the opposite sex, something like this was going to happen. I had no comprehension of consent. I didn't understand what happened. So I was blaming myself, really. And I just felt the only way to fix it was to marry him. Disfellowshipping is not just a religious label, it's social erasure. When everyone you've known your entire life just drops you, as if you never existed, as if you never mattered, as if you were never important to them. Because I believed that what they did was right. I thought that I was the one that was wrong. It was so deeply embedded in my mind. For Jehovah's Witnesses, accepting a blood transfusion is considered a serious sin, even in life-threatening circumstances. So I needed a blood transfusion, and I refused it. My blood count was literally 3, and my body went into hypovolemic shock.
Mine is the only voice.
What have I been doing?
Lay down my autonomy.
After that, it got very dark very quickly.
Hey guys, my name is Shalise Ansola, and this is Cults to Consciousness, where we discuss leaving high-demand religions or organizations and finding healing and independence through awareness and true individual sovereignty. If you're only listening on the podcast platforms and you want to see our faces, go to YouTube at Cults to Consciousness. It's the best way to support the show. We love seeing you guys in the comment section, leaving those words of encouragement for our guests who are real people, bravely coming on and sharing their stories with us. And any other way you can interact with the post, liking, sharing, of course, subscribing, is going to boost the algorithm so more people can see these and become aware of these groups and red flags. Today's guest, she reached out through our Jot form. As a reminder, you can always submit to be on the show if that's something of interest to you. The link is in our About section. And we are going back into Jehovah's Witnesses. So we have a few interviews that we have lined up for Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm really looking forward to exploring this in more depth. We have covered it in the past. We have a whole playlist if you guys are interested in going back and looking at those interviews too. But today we're focusing more on a woman's experience, or more specifically, a young girl's experience, the learning boundaries around consent and being shamed and blamed for things that happened, and also just the psychological torture you go through and how long it takes to deprogram from that even after leaving. So thank you so much for being here today, Meg.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yes, I told you before we started recording that I was really impressed with your submission video because of all the different things you went through and how you were able to rise up from it, how you were able to tell your story, and basically just everything that had to do with your childhood and what you went through. I really appreciate you showing up today and wanting to share your story. So this is the first time you've done anything like this. So I'm just happy that you're here.
Yeah, I'm stoked. I'm so excited.
Yeah. So what was it that made you decide to come on and share your story, or to submit to share your story?
I have watched so many videos from ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups, but particularly from Jehovah's Witnesses. I've never really heard someone tell their story quite the way that I have, the way that I would tell it, I guess. The way that things happened to me and the way I ended up having to process and come out of it. And I just thought it might be a valuable perspective, especially for some young Jehovah's Witness women, but really anyone who needs to hear it.
Yeah, that's great. So then let's start off with a little bit about your childhood and your background, where in the world you grew up, and what your home life was like.
I was born in 1986, actually the same day the Challenger exploded. Pretty loud hint from the universe as to how my life was going to go. But I was born obviously into a Jehovah's Witness family. Both sides of my family converted in the 1960s. My mom's parents and my dad's father all joined the religion. My dad's mom never did. She ended up being the one place in my childhood that felt consistently safe and normal. And she also absolutely had opinions about the entire Jehovah's Witness situation. But when I was very young, things were actually pretty stable. I was an extremely bright kid. I was hyperlexic and I could read before I was 2 years old. And I had like an almost photographic memory. So learning was very easy for me. And everything in the first few years of my life was pretty normal. But when I was 6, my mom's dad died. And that changed everything in my house. My mom fell into a very deep depression that lasted for a lot of years. She was not getting any help. See, by the time I was a kid, technically the Jehovah's Witness prohibition against getting mental health treatment was not a thing anymore, but culturally it was very much frowned upon. So most people who were struggling were not getting any kind of help that they needed. And she unfortunately kind of fell in that group. And I was very observant as a kid, and I was very sensitive as a kid. I felt everything extremely intensely. And I was very aware of how much pain she was in. I remember trying to comfort her in any small way that I could, just try to make her feel better. And sometimes I'm the oldest of 3, so sometimes it meant taking care of my younger siblings. And keep in mind, I was 6. Um, and sometimes it just meant like absorbing a lot of emotions that I didn't really know what to do with. My cousins, they remember it as me being like a tiny adult, even at that age. And it was just a kid trying to figure out how to navigate an extremely heavy environment, like just suddenly. So it was pretty intense. And like I said, I mean, I can clearly see as an adult that my mom just really, really needed help, but she was just dealing with it by herself. My parents, they genuinely believed that they were doing the right thing. They thought they were raising me with the truth about God and the world. And but with the combination of my mom's depression and the expectations of the religion, the pressure in our home itself, it was just an environment where I just felt like I had to be perfect all the time. Of course, school was also complicated. I went to a very small rural school, maybe 25 kids in my grade, maybe 200 kids in the whole school. So even though things were very easy academically, the problem was I was so far ahead of the other kids in my grade that the school just didn't know what to do with me. So a lot of the time I was doing completely separate work while everyone else was doing the normal assignments, which sounds nice in theory. In practice, it was me sitting in a corner doing different worksheets.
Hmm.
And you add that I was painfully shy and almost never spoke unless I was directly asked to. And then, of course, there's the Jehovah's Witness part. So, birthdays are out, holidays are out. The small rituals that help kids bond with each other, not options. So I was already the weird kid academically. I was also shy and I couldn't participate in half the things that other kids just normally did. So, it's just a pretty efficient system, just making sure that you don't quite fit anywhere.
Yeah, it seems like you were isolated within an already very small system. Were there other Jehovah's Witness kids in school with you?
No, I was the only one when I was little. And then as my siblings came into the school, they were there. But no, there were no other Jehovah's Witness kids at my school.
Yeah. And were you allowed to make friends at all with kids that weren't Jehovah's Witness?
The friendships at school, they existed in kind of a strange space. I understood very early that they weren't supposed to be too deep. I could be friendly with people, but forming close bonds with worldly kids was very discouraged. Doesn't mean that I did not form those friendships anyway. I definitely did, but I wasn't supposed to. So I learned very early what I was not allowed to talk about at home. And that was one of those things, because if I did, I was in trouble. So there's like a quiet split, I guess, in my mind, the version of me that exists at school and then the version of me that exists at home and in the Jehovah's Witness world. And I wouldn't say that my personality necessarily changed. I just knew what I could and couldn't talk about, I guess, if that makes sense.
And aside from school, your door knocking, is this every weekend or certain times of the week that you would go?
Oh, field service. Literally the most excruciating thing about being a Jehovah's Witness, especially when you're shy. More so as a teenager, because I don't really remember it too much as a kid. But you would kind of just pile. Oh, you would go to the Kingdom Hall on a Saturday morning. You get all dressed up and go to the Kingdom Hall. You'd meet for field service, and you'd pile in a car, and then you would go door to door. You were supposed to like memorize like 30-second presentations. Even 30 seconds is an eternity when you're shy and you're standing at someone's door trying to talk. Like you don't want to do it. They don't want you. They don't want you there. it's it's not a fun thing to do. I do remember knocking as quietly as I could and hoping no one came to the door. Or I even would fake ring a doorbell sometimes just to like pretend like I was doing it because I really didn't want to do it. I hated it so much.
Yeah, that seems really painful. We didn't do anything to that extent, but we would go caroling or and most people are fine to like, "Oh, they're so sweet little kids singing a song." Like no one's going to be mean to them. But I can't imagine having to go and try to proselytize as a young person who didn't really want to be there versus the missionaries in Mormonism that very clearly sign up to do the thing for 2 years of their life and they're like gung ho about it.
Right.
Did it ever lead to anything successful?
I had a couple of Bible studies here and there. I was never enthusiastic about it. And honestly, looking back, of course, I feel terrible about it because I'm like, oh, I hope that didn't stick with them because I don't really want them there. I mean, yeah, a little bit. I was too shy to have too much success, I guess. But, most people already just don't want you there and are trying to get rid of you. It's very rare to have a successful experience going door to door as a Jehovah's Witness. It's just not very common.
Do you remember any of the pitches? I know it was such a long time ago, but are there any that stand out to you as being particularly painful to talk about?
Oh, I mean, there would be things like, look at the world around you. Don't you think there is a mental health crisis? Or look at all the wars. We have the answer to why this is happening and what the future is going to look, just stuff like that. It was always something like that. And they would encourage you to look at current events and try to rope them in. But it was always like so painfully inappropriate. Like, you're like, "Ugh, nobody wants to talk about this on a Saturday morning. They're just trying to eat their cereal, man."
We had someone come to our door back in California, and I realized immediately, I was like, "Oh, they're Jehovah's Witnesses." I'm like, "They have no idea whose door they're knocking on right now." But the pitch, though, it was fine at first. It was very tame. It was something to do with God and Jesus, and I was like, "Okay, all right, let's hear what you have to say." But then it went almost conspiracy theory, and it got really dark really fast about I'm trying to remember the specifics. It was something about the end of the world and the leaders are all corrupt and everyone's going to burn in flames or like something really just with a big smile on her face. And I was like, this is so interesting that she's
It's
just
bizarre,
like
right?
100% down to tell me about all of these horrible things that are going to happen as she's smiling. And I was just like, I can't get on board with that part.
I've noticed that Jehovah's Witnesses are very susceptible to getting roped into. It's interesting you said that they're very susceptible to getting roped into conspiracy theories, and I just think it's because their minds have just been molded for so many years that I don't know. They're very malleable.
Yeah, and I wanna talk about your childhood where you mentioned you were kind of molded into the good girl or the perfect girl. You had to come across as having it all together because maybe your family didn't necessarily, and you were kind of stepping up into that role as you had already mentioned a little bit. What did that mean for you in practice, and did you feel like you were forced into this role, or that was more of like how you had to how you had to conform for survival purposes within your family?
A lot of it was just for survival purposes. My mom, oh, like I said, she was very unwell, and I have a lot of compassion for her now. Looking back, I was much angrier when I was younger. She was very volatile emotionally, and she was always convinced that I was doing something wrong, and like to absurd degrees. Probably about the time I was in 5th grade or so, she started going through everything that I had constantly. So my backpack, my notebooks, my dresser drawers, my pants pockets, anything that she could possibly check, she was looking for evidence that I did something wrong. And I mean, let's face it, to be fair, she occasionally found something because I was a kid. I wasn't perfect, and of course I was doing some things that I shouldn't have been doing. But it was just like this feeling that I was always being watched. I was always being evaluated, and I was always at risk of disappointing someone. So it was just this insane amount of pressure to be perfect at all times. I didn't know how my mom would react if I fell short in any way. I mean, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified, and it's not really her fault. And I don't want to make it seem like it was, but like an example would be more of a minor example, but it kind of gives you a good glimpse as to how afraid I was. When I was 13 and I hit puberty, I started my period, and my mother, I mean, I was so scared of her that I couldn't even tell her. I would like stuff toilet paper in my underwear, and then I would go sneak in her bathroom and take a pad out of her bathroom. And I did this for like 6 months. Like, it's like an impressively long time to commit to a logistical strategy like that, right? But it kind of came to a head one night because she wanted me to get dressed for the meeting while she was in the room. And I was 13. I was mortified, but I was also secretly on my period. And I didn't want to get undressed in front of her. And so I was like refusing. And she was absolutely melting down, screaming at me like I was just the worst kid in the world. And I'm just sitting there like, I'm 13 and embarrassed. It's just kind of like a small example of how intense it was and how afraid I was. I mean, it's kind of, just kind of silly, but like a real thing that happened.
Yeah. Well, it's also normal to not want to change in front of your mom at that age anyway. Aside
Yeah,
from the period thing, it's kind of like, Mom, stop. Give me my
right.
privacy.
I was genuinely mortified.
Yeah. Do you think a lot of what she inflicted on you as far as discipline or standards was religious based, or do you think that that may have been something separate, a separate programming that she was working on?
A lot of it was religious based, and she was afraid that I would not stay within the religion. Well, in hindsight, maybe maybe a fair fear to have, because I clearly didn't. She just had really high expectations for me. And she did not do this to my siblings. I should be clear. She didn't do that to them. But she did do it to me. And I'm not really sure if it was because I was the oldest, or if because she saw something in me that maybe she didn't like, or I'm really not sure why I was the specific target, but most of it was religious based for sure. She just wanted me to be the most successful Jehovah's Witness I could be, which as a woman is what, a pioneer, full-time ministry. Like, that's all you can aspire to, marrying an elder. I mean, it's not like you have tons of options, but I guess that's what she wanted. It was obviously not something I was ever going to be, and maybe that's what it was.
Yeah. Something you had mentioned to me was how she wanted you to date an elder's son.
Yes. When I was 16, I met this guy at an assembly, which in Jehovah's Witness world, they have like conventions and assemblies, and basically they're like multi-day events where I think Mormons have something similar, conference, right?
Yeah,
Something
general
like that.
conference.
And yeah, it's just an all day thing, and you just like you get all dressed up and you go sit in a convention center, and you look super spiritual, and and it's literally like you get there at like 8 in the morning and you're there until like 5 in the evening. Like it's almost like a test of endurance. It's excruciating.
Yeah. Yeah, I never had to go because I was never cool enough. I was never cool enough Mormon to get tickets to go to Salt Lake. It was like 2 hours away. But just sitting in my own home on the couch listening to this drone on was so painful. I hated it.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone's ever mentioned I don't know what other people call it. I call it the Jehovah's Witness accent. They all kind of sound the same. They all speak in like this very like low, almost monotone,
It's
and it's not really an
hypnotic.
accent. Yeah, and it's very strange. But I can immediately identify a Jehovah's Witness by the way they speak. Um,
Have
but
you
they all speak
watched
that way.
Have you watched any of the Mormon conference speakers? Because I bet when I watched yours, I was like, they could easily be a Mormon talking in a general conference because it's the same brothers and sisters. We are gathered here today.
Yes,
And it's like,
exactly like
oh.
that.
But I wonder if you listen to them, if you would think that they sounded like Jehovah's Witness, or you still think that there's a distinction between the two.
Well, you know what? I'm gonna have to take you up on that experiment and check and see
Yeah.
because you might have the point. Maybe they just both sound that way.
Yeah. I wonder if it's just like a cult leader thing because.
Ugh, makes me cringe.
Okay, so you were at an assembly.
Yeah, so I met this guy, and he was an elder son, and we've been out a few times, but I didn't like him. So I was not really super invested in pursuing that at all, and I just kind of wanted to end it. But my mom became very invested. She became obsessed with the idea that I might marry an elder son. And I'm 16 years old, like I'm a kid. She was actively threatening to punish me if I broke up with him. And it just got so crazy because she was staying up late at night. Do you remember AIM? AOL Instant
Yes.
Messenger?
MSN Messenger was my jam.
Nice. I remember that one too. But she would stay up late at night talking to him, just like instant messaging with him. And they were like talking about me. It was so weird. And she was just so invested in it. And I mean, for an entire year this went on with my mother not letting me break up with this guy. And I did not want to date him. I didn't like him. Like I said, she was active. She was trying, but she was threatening me threatening to punish me. And eventually, the only way I could see out of that was to just stop talking when I was around him. And so I just went silent. And eventually he got tired of it and broke up with me. Not my most mature strategy. I fully acknowledge that, but it did work. And that was the only way I got out of it because I couldn't break up with him. I had to make him break up with me to get out of that because otherwise I'm stuck. And I didn't really know how to put my foot down and say, "Mom, I don't want to do this." I didn't know how to explain to her why I didn't want to. I didn't really even know how to tell him that I didn't want to date. I just felt trapped.
Mhm.
And so the only thing I could think of was just stop talking.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it worked out.
You're never really armed with the tools to know how to date or to know what's okay or know what boundaries are, what consent is, and I know that's a part of your story. Is this around the age when that started happening?
It was a little later. After I graduated high school, I started college, and my family was a little different in that regard because at the time, and I'm pretty sure they've changed this, but at the time, higher education was very discouraged in Jehovah's Witness world. But my parents thought I had the ability, which I did, and they wanted me to pursue it. And so I did go to college. I was so overwhelmed, and I was just overwhelmed with life. It wasn't just college, it was just life in general. And I was so depressed, and I didn't understand why I was depressed. I mean, in retrospect, I can identify many reasons why I was depressed. But at the time, I didn't really understand. And I was just spiraling and spiraling and spiraling. I guess my sophomore year of college, that fall, I just completely broke down mentally. I attempted suicide, and I ended up getting put in a psychiatric ward of a hospital for a while, like 3 weeks or something. But at that point, my mind was gone, and it was. I mean, looking back, it's really sad, just the way I started. the way I started life, just reading so young and being able to remember everything. And then all of a sudden it was just nothing. There was nothing up there. I was gone. It took me a while just to kind of start getting myself back together. And the following year, I ended up taking a job with an airline, and I moved out of my parents' house and into an apartment with another Jehovah's Witness girl. Kind of felt like, freedom, like finally I could be an adult, but really I was just kind of like put into a world where I didn't really have the tools to navigate it at all. And then I started dating a JW guy. He was a little bit older than me, like 6 years older. He came over one day when she wasn't home, and we were making out. Things kept escalating. I said no. He wouldn't stop. And that's how I lost my virginity. And I had no comprehension of consent. I didn't understand what happened. So I was blaming myself, really. And I just felt like the only way to fix it was to marry him. I fortunately did not marry him. But that's what I thought I had to do. So I stayed in this relationship instead of ending it like I should have. All I knew was that I had always been taught that if you allowed yourself to be alone with someone of the opposite sex, something like this was going to happen. That's what I was taught.
Yeah.
So it felt like no matter what the circumstances were, it was my fault. Honestly, it does young women such a disservice because it doesn't prepare them mentally for circumstances where it's not their fault. It also doesn't give young men enough credit. It just makes it seem like they're animals and have no control over themselves. So, it's really toxic, and it was so damaging. Since I stayed in that relationship, the sexual relationship did continue. And at that point it was consensual, but it was because it was shaped by guilt.
Yeah.
And the feeling that the damage was already done. Eventually, I could tell he was pulling away from that relationship. And not long after that, I found out he was also involved with someone else. So,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. I have to pause here and just let out some of my anger.
Okay.
So
have at it.
I understand the feeling. The same thing happened to me, and the feeling of, well, I'm ruined anyway, so may as well just, same thing. I stayed with a guy. He ended up being in a relationship with look at that. Maybe that's why I'm so angry. I'm projecting my story onto yours because it's the same.
Yeah, similar, very.
But I think it's what's so frustrating about it. The most frustrating part is that when you teach purity culture to young girls and young boys, and you teach black and white thinking, that's what you're going to get is black and white thinking. There's no nuance. There's no awareness of boundaries of consent. And we've talked about this so many times, and we will continue to do it because I just want people to understand how damaging purity culture is. If you choose to wait until marriage, that's amazing. If that's what you want to do, that's great. But you have to arm kids with the knowledge of what's going on with their feelings, their bodily sensations, about their urges, about safe sex, about their options, because if you don't, they will end up in a situation like us where something happens that was not consensual and they just stick with the black and white thinking. Well, I'm ruined, so I may as well stay with a guy, which is not true because both of us could have said, wow, he completely crossed my boundaries. Even though I said no multiple times, I probably shouldn't be with this person. But instead, we're thinking, well, I probably shouldn't have let him get that close to me anyway. Well, I probably shouldn't have been disobeying the rules anyway. This was right after I left the church. So for me, it was like, well, that's what you get, Shalise. What did you think was going to happen? They told you all along. And so it's just so frustrating that especially women or young girls are bearing the burden of this black and white thinking that does not have to be that way. It does not have to mean once you go down that path, you can't turn around or you can't pivot or you can't knock the guy in the face. I don't sorry, I get so riled up that for some reason purity culture rests squarely on the shoulders of the girls and the women when we should be looking at the men who are crossing those boundaries. Because it's, well, and it's not even just a sex thing. It can be in either case, but we tend to always blame the victim instead of the one doing the harming.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yes. Rant over. Okay. So you stayed with this guy and then you find out that he's dating someone else. Oh my gosh. I'm sure you were just like, why was I even with him? I didn't even need to be with him. I didn't want to be with him. And now I feel even worse because he's been with somebody else. So what's going through your head?
I mean, honestly, something inside of me just completely snapped. And, up until that point, I had been carrying this enormous amount of guilt because I thought I had committed this serious sin. And, I was ashamed. I was angry. I was completely overwhelmed. And the logical solution, according to everything I had ever been taught my entire life, was to confess. So I went to the elders, and that's absolutely a wild thing to do if you sit there and think about it. But that's what I did. Just imagine me. I'm very young. I've just been through a very confusing, very painful experience. And my instinct was to go sit in a room with 3 middle-aged men in cheap suits and explain my sex life in detail. That's
Because
exactly
that's
what I
what you
did.
were trained to do. That's what I was trained to do. I mean, I think Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses are one of the few religions that expect you to confess sexual sins even as, and I say sexual sins with air quotes, even as a young child to a random man in the congregation. It's not okay. I will be one of the first to say it that I think it's childish. I think that men have no business knowing what's going on unless it is to call the police and report it and protect this child, but not to scrutinize and blame and shame because it's so backwards and disgusting.
Yeah, they absolutely do that to children. And I mean, I guess I technically wasn't a child, but my brain certainly wasn't fully developed.
Yeah.
I was so young and I didn't know anything. I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't know anything. And you and I have talked about this a little bit, but that's when they formed their judicial committee. The way that looks, you sit in a small back room in the Kingdom Hall, and there's 3 elders at the table with you. One of them has a notebook out and is writing things down, and the others lead the conversation. And they start asking questions. There were a lot of questions. There were not general questions. These were very specific questions. They asked, where did it happen? How many times? What exactly happened each time? They asked about what positions. They asked about oral sex. They asked about anal sex. They asked if I orgasmed. They asked if he orgasmed. Basically, any hell you can imagine. Yeah. They asked. It was so degrading. It was humiliating. And at the time, I remember thinking it felt deeply wrong. But I also assumed that they must know what they were doing. These are supposed to be spiritual men, right? But it was humiliating. The most disturbing thing that has ever happened to me. And I know that they still do this to people. And I know I'm not the only one this has happened to. But it's just horrible to sit there, especially to someone who's barely more than a child. Just a very young woman.
Yeah. I mean, you couldn't pay me to go into a room now as a full-grown adult and talk
Right.
about my sex life.
Never.
It's humiliating
Never.
no matter how old you are, but also the fact that you are a young girl, barely moved out of your parents' house, and you have these old men asking you details about your sex life. That's so wrong.
At the end of all of that, they decided that I wasn't repentant, which is confusing because I literally turned myself in. But they made their decision and I was disfellowshipped. And I know that you have touched on this in other interviews, but in Jehovah's Witness culture, it's not, disfellowshipping is not just a religious label, it's social erasure.
Yeah.
So my friends were gone. Most of my family stopped speaking to me. My entire social world disappeared in a single announcement from the platform at the Kingdom Hall. And, you start noticing what that actually means in real life. When my sister got married, I was invited to the ceremony, but not the reception. When my brother got married, I wasn't invited at all. Those are the kinds of moments you really start to understand how far the separation goes. My parents, to their credit, they did not completely cut me off, but the relationship did change. It's a very strange experience to realize that an entire community can decide that you no longer exist. They literally treat you like you're dead.
Yeah.
But the belief system internally doesn't automatically disappear.
Yeah.
So you're alone. And I didn't know anybody. I didn't have anybody. And I'm stuck with this crazy amount of guilt because I believed that what they did was right. I thought that I was the one that was wrong. It was so deeply embedded in my mind. I thought I had failed, and I absolutely just tortured myself over it all the time. There was a massive vacuum in my life. Humans, we're not great at living inside of emotional vacuums. So I tried to fill it. I tried to fill that with the only things I really knew how to. So during that period, there was a lot of drinking. There were a lot of choices that, looking back now, were clearly coming from a place of pain and loneliness. But I was also incredibly lucky because the people I met during that time, people who had absolutely no obligation to care about me, stepped in and helped me survive. When I had nowhere to live, they gave me a place to stay. When I needed work, they gave me a job. And they accepted me exactly as I was, even though I was very much a culty weirdo who didn't know how to socialize like a normal person. But they were very gracious towards me. That I can never repay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what would have happened to me if that had not happened.
So from the Jehovah's Witness perspective, they stopped talking to you because they thought you just had sex, when in reality you were assaulted and you were kind of forced into this relationship with this man. In their minds, they're like, oh yeah, it's totally reasonable that we cut her off and shun her because she had sex before marriage. Is that what's... Or did they even know? Or was it just she's disfellowshipped and that's all we need to know?
Officially, when they announce that you're disfellowshipped, they don't say why.
Yeah.
They basically will just get up and say, this person is no longer a Jehovah's Witness or something along those lines. And people know what that means. You're not supposed to talk to them ever again unless they're reinstated. But the gossip mill within the Jehovah's Witnesses is insane. So everyone knows. Everyone knows. Well, they think they do anyway. They think they know what happened, but they don't actually know what happened. They know what happened without any context or any nuance, if that makes sense.
Who would be the person to tell them what happened? Do you think the elders would have told somebody? Do you think it was your parents that maybe said something? Because how else would they know?
It's, several ways. Absolutely an elder could, say something to his wife. They're not supposed to, but they do. It happens all the time. I know before the announcement was made, I did talk to a couple of friends to say, hey, look, I just wanted to let you know before it happened. So I had a chance to say goodbye on my own terms because I knew what was coming. In some ways, I probably inadvertently put things into the gossip mill. In other ways, other people were talking about it. Of course, the guy probably told people. the other girl involved probably told some people. So there's probably like 5 different versions of this story circulating around. And they absolutely talked about it.
Was he disfellowshipped?
Yes, he was. Not as long as I was, but yes, he was.
Were you under the impression that you were going to do everything it took to get reinstated?
Oh, there's a question. At first, yes. But I went to a couple of meetings, and at the time I would sit in the very back room so I wouldn't be close to many people because I didn't want to deal with that. Because, you go in there and no one looks at you, no one talks to you. People you've known your entire life act like you're not even there. And it's really hard. It's a really hard thing to deal with. I remember being at the meeting, and there were these 2 older women sitting directly behind me. And it's the middle of the meeting, okay? I could hear them gossiping about me directly behind me. Like, I could hear them. And they're I can't believe she's here, just running their little mouths. At that point, I was like, I can't do this. I can't do it. And so I just didn't go anymore for a long time, a very long time. I didn't go. But yeah, it's not an easy place to exist when everyone you've known your entire life just drops you, as if you never existed, as if you never mattered, as if you were never important to them. That hurts. Especially when you didn't, well, you're not a bad person. Even if you think that you maybe did something wrong, you're not a bad person. And it feels, even if you feel like the disfellowshipping sentence was correct, you still deep down feel a sense of injustice because it's unnatural, especially when your family stops talking to you. It's unnatural. That's not how family relationships are supposed to be. And I struggled for a while. After a few years, I guess, I started dating a guy I went to high school with. We ended up getting married. For a while, things were pretty stable. I was happy. We got along really well. We were best friends even. And it was okay. I still didn't have my family, and that still hurt. But at least I had someone. I had someone there.
Yeah.
And that was, it was better. I didn't feel as empty. And then I guess it was the winter of 2013. I got pregnant. We were very happy.
How old were you around then?
26 or 27, somewhere in there.
And I have to know, did you invite them to your wedding?
I invited them all to my wedding. My parents did come.
They did come.
They did leave. They did leave immediately after we said, "All right, I do," but they did come. My siblings did not come. My grandmother, my Jehovah's Witness grandmother, did not show up. She was my only living grandparent at that time. None of my aunts or cousins or anybody came. Like it was basically his family, a couple of friends. That was basically it.
Yeah.
But yeah, we were happy. We were so excited about having a baby. Then I started bleeding, and then I started hemorrhaging. And I was rushed to the emergency room, rapidly losing too much blood. It was a medical emergency. I was not expecting this part to be so hard. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I lost so much blood. My blood count. I don't know how much you know about the specifics of what this looks like, but my blood count was literally 3, and my body went into hypovolemic shock, and I needed a blood transfusion. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that the Bible commands Christians to abstain from blood, and that language appears in a few places in the Bible, prominently in the book of Acts, and the organization interprets that to mean that taking blood into your body in any form, including a transfusion, is against God's law. So for Jehovah's Witnesses, accepting a blood transfusion is considered a serious sin, even in life-threatening circumstances. And so I needed a blood transfusion, and I refused it, even after everything that had happened, even after losing my entire community. Those beliefs were so deeply ingrained. I was willing to die rather than break that rule. That's how deeply those ideas can take root in someone's mind. I was willing to die for a religion whose members wouldn't even acknowledge me if they saw me at the grocery store. You know, it was the worst night of my life. And honestly, in some ways, I did want to die. But I refused the blood transfusion because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. And, with some perspective, not the right decision to make. And I'm fortunate I'm still here. Fortunate is a Jehovah's Witness word, by the way. They don't say lucky, they say fortunate, and it still comes out of my mouth. Luck is bad, but somehow fortunate is better. I don't know why. And that was one of the hardest periods of my life, recovering from that. Life goes on. Things start moving forward. You have to pick it up and
Wow.
do what you got to do.
Let me be the one to say you were lucky to have survived that. And what did your husband think? What was he saying? He was probably beside himself. Like, what do you mean you're not going to take this? It could kill you if you don't.
My Jehovah's Witness family, they weren't speaking to me. And he had a lot of problems with that. He did not like that. He had a lot of anger towards my family for how I was being treated because he didn't believe it was right, even though I was actively defending them, which is crazy. But he did not like it. And of course, he didn't approve of any of that decision either. But it was already in my medical chart that I wouldn't take a blood transfusion. I did specifically say when I went in there, no blood, and that they would give you a little wristband that says no blood. But yeah, when you're bleeding to death, I mean, that's so scary. It's so scary. And, a lot of people have died that way.
Do you think that part of you didn't want to take the blood because you wanted to be maybe even down the road reinstated and you didn't want to have to get into another committee where you defend your decision?
Absolutely. That was most of it. At this point, I'm still being crushed by guilt, constant guilt. And the theme of my life, crushing guilt all the time. I'm always being told I'm doing something wrong. I'm always being treated like I've done something wrong. And after a point, it's all so internalized that you just think everything that you're doing is the wrong thing. And so you're trying very, very hard to make sure that you don't make mistakes, that you keep everything perfect because you don't want to be judged. You don't want to make anything worse. And you don't want to have to explain yourself later.
Did you ever talk to your parents about that incident and tell them what you did? I'm wondering if they even cared to give you a pat on the back or if they were freaked out about it. And what was their reaction?
They know about the miscarriage and they know how serious it was. I don't know if I've ever explicitly said I refuse a blood transfusion. I'm not sure if I've ever told them that. But if I did, it would just be like, well, you did the right thing for Jehovah. I mean, that would be the reaction.
I just wondered, because a lot of times the rules make sense until it's your own child in danger. And then you're like, wait. When it comes down to the reality of some of these rules that they put in place and you realize the damage and the even abuse or how serious it can get when you follow these rules with a close family member, I wondered if they might have had that reaction of like, wait, was that the right thing? But you think they were still so heavily involved in the doctrine that they would have been like, yep, that's what you were supposed to do.
I truly don't think it would have changed anything. I don't think so. But I've known several Jehovah's Witnesses who have lost kids that way. Sometimes actual children, not just their kid, but their actual kids, like the little kids that have died. And and I know you're a parent, and I'm a parent, and I can't imagine. I couldn't do it.
That makes me emotional to think about not only the fact of my child passing away, but knowing that they didn't have to.
Yeah.
That I allowed them to pass away. Like, I don't know how they could live with themselves, honestly. I know that there's a lot of mind control that happens in these groups. You and I both know how that works and how you can be so blinded to certain things. But when it comes to the life of a child, you would think that you would hope that someone would wake up just enough to be like, I don't know if this is the right thing.
You would hope, but I've seen it happen several times. Thankfully not dozens of times, but I know that it's happened countless thousands of times all over the world. But I've known several that have lost people that way, lost kids that way. And the feeling seems almost like they're martyred.
Yeah.
Like, look at the sacrifice for Jehovah. Look, this 12-year-old was so strong. And I'm like, that was a kid, man. That did not have to happen.
What was the toll like on your body trying to build itself back up from that?
I was physically very weak for a long time. Emotionally, I was not okay. And it took a couple of years probably for me to feel really whole again. And really honestly, what did it was when my oldest son was born. That was really, I don't want to say, that's not my only pregnancy loss, but that's the worst one, the most significant one for these purposes. But after my oldest son was born, I felt like I finally had a purpose. I had somewhere constructive to put my energy. I had someone to love and who would love me back without question. And that healed me in so many ways. I call him my superhero. He really did in so many ways save my life. And at that point, something that really started to matter to me was the idea that he would know his family. And I'm not really sure why that felt so important to me, but it did. It was extremely important to me. And so at that point, after he was born, I just decided to try to get reinstated. In JW world, that means attending meetings regularly for months, sometimes years, while being completely ignored by everyone. So, every week I'd go to the Kingdom Hall, sit through the meeting, and then walk back out without speaking to anyone. And, again, people I'd known since I was a kid just walk fast, not acknowledge me. There was I wouldn't even say there was anger or anything like that. It was just more like they deliberately pretended I wasn't there. You just keep doing that week after week after week, hoping eventually someone decides you've shown enough repentance. And that is every bit as fun as it sounds, by the way. Eventually, I guess it was probably the fall of 2016, they finally announced that I was reinstated. Now, suddenly, the same people who had been shunning me for years and years, they were coming up to me, hugging me, crying real tears, telling me how happy they were I was back. It was very emotional for them. And I was very uncomfortable. I guess somewhere along the way, I just had changed. I spent years building a life outside that world. In that moment, it just became so clear I did not belong there. And so I did not go very long. I quit going almost immediately. Maybe a couple of weeks I went and I was out. I'm like, I can't do it.
That is very interesting that you worked so hard to get reinstated. And then once you were, that's when you realized, this is weird. I don't want to be a part of this.
Yeah, I did. I was so uncomfortable. And, and even then, I wouldn't even say that the belief system disappeared. It wasn't even that. I was so uncomfortable. I'm like, I don't fit in. Even though I've spent my entire life filtering until the past few years, I've spent my whole life filtering what I can say around whom, that kind of thing. I'm not really very good, I guess, at pretending to be something I'm not anymore. I'm just not very good at it. And when you grow up in something like that, it shapes the way your mind works. So all that filtering, the guilt, the constant sense that you're doing something wrong, those patterns stick around long after you quit going to the meetings. 2020 was a hard year for everybody. It was a hard year for me. I had a really rough time that year between the pandemic and I had to work from home. I didn't have childcare, so I had to work with two little kids in the house, and my grandmother died, and I had so much going on emotionally. All of the pressure that had been building for so many years, it just finally just caught up, and I had another major mental collapse. And at that point, it was very, very clear. If I did not get help, I was not going to survive. So I started therapy. And my therapist, she's wonderful. I'm still seeing her even now. But yeah, for a long time, I didn't even tell her I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness. I just kind of like kept that part covert.
That is interesting. Wait, can we dive into that? Was it because you
Yes,
didn't want the
absolutely.
judgment? Was it because you didn't think she would understand, or you didn't think it was relevant?
None of those, really. It was, and this goes back to kind of what I touched on early on. It's more of a JW weirdness around mental health treatment. And I knew if I brought it up, she was going not necessarily judge me. I didn't think she was going to judge me. I thought that she was immediately going to judge the organization and how they treated me, which was probably a fair assumption.
Right.
You're probably not going to believe this. It took me 2 years to say that out loud, that I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness.
No way. So in some ways, you still felt allegiance to protect the facade or protect this identity of your church.
Yeah, I didn't want a bad mouth. I didn't want any of that, because I didn't, even though I wasn't really a Jehovah's Witness, I didn't want to be a bad representative of Jehovah's Witnesses. That's, again, deeply ingrained, very deeply. And when I finally did tell her, she looked right at me and she said, "Now, why did it take you 2 years to tell me you were raised in a cult?" And
She used the C word on you. Not
she
the
sure
C
did.
word.
She sure did. And I got defensive, man. I was like, "That's harsh." And I kid you not, she goes, "I'm sorry, high control group."
Good for her. That's so funny though. And it's true. She's probably like, it all makes sense. And I also wanted to point out before we keep going that sometimes it's okay to badmouth the things that hurt us. And I
Yeah,
say
I
that with
agree.
my full chest because so many times members who are still part of Name Your Group here will say, you can leave the church, but you can't leave it alone. Or why do you have to make your entire personality? It's like, I'm just trying to work through all of the psychological, mental, and sometimes physical abuse that went on in this group. And it's okay to be vocal about that. It's okay to say, hey, this thing hurt me. If it's hurting you too, maybe you should do something about it. It's okay to want to wake people up, even though it won't work most of the time. It's okay to be vocal, and it's okay to badmouth to the extent that you're saying, this is what happened to me and this is how it harmed me. And if you think that that's me just trying to tear the organization down, then you're not listening, because I'm literally just giving you a chronological storytelling of what went on, and you think that that's badmouthing, which also says more about the organization than it does about me.
Exactly. And it took me a long time to get there. But yeah, but to your point, telling your story factually is not bad mouthing anything. You're just
Yeah.
telling what happened to you. And if you're getting offended by it, then you need to take a step back and take a look at why maybe you're offended.
Yes.
So yeah, I agree.
So you looked at her and you were like, try again. I was not raised in a cult.
I was mad at her. I really was. But I guess we would have 2 weeks in between sessions. And in that 2 weeks, I did something I had never done before.
Did you Google?
I researched the organization. The information
Yes.
is real, and they really make you afraid to do it. But at that point, it felt important enough that I needed to. And so I just started Googling. I started going on Reddit. I started watching videos. I started just this whole journey. And I had to admit she was right. Once I started looking at my life through that lens, a lot of things suddenly make sense. Like the way that I would split my identity, that made sense. The constant fear of disappointing people made sense. The way guilt seemed to appear automatically, even when I hadn't done anything wrong, made sense. It was like someone had finally handed me the instruction manual for my own brain. And so that started a long process of me reclaiming my own story, because I had been filtering myself my entire life, trying to be the version of me that other people wanted me to be, and learning to see my upbringing for what it was didn't just change how I understood the religion itself. It changed how I understood my entire life. That just kind of sent me down a road of learning, reclaiming something I didn't know I had lost, and gaining the ability just to speak honestly about my own experience. It's my life.
How did that affect your marriage? Were you still married at the time?
I was still married at the time. Gosh, she was relieved. Like, finally.
Yeah.
And we did end up getting divorced a couple years later. But yeah, at the time, it was just like, finally, she's finally mentally out of this. And yeah, it did change a lot of things for me. Things, I mean, I'm not going to say it was easy, because it was a lot to process. There's a lot to process. So there was grief, there was anger, there was a lot of things at first before I was able to get calm about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not even really angry about it anymore. I am angry at the power structure. I'm not angry at individual JWs. I think the ones that I know, most of them are not bad people at their core. They're just misguided. They don't know what they don't know,
Do you feel like that gave you a new perspective on your mom and your dad?
Particularly my mom. It helped me view her as a victim, and that helped heal a lot of the resentment I had towards her, because I never really understood why I was treated the way I was. I never understood any of that. And and now I get it. She was unwell and she wasn't getting help because she wasn't really supposed to, or it was is discouraged. I'm able to look at her and see a victim, even if she doesn't know she is. I'm able to do that. And that really keeps me from being too bitter with her.
Yeah.
And it helps me from being bitter overall. I mean, I'm not an angry person, which you can probably tell. I'm just kind of chill. But I do like to understand things, and I want to see things accurately. I don't want a pretty lie, I want the truth.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I finally have that. Finally, I'm 40 and I finally have it.
What do you feel like has been the biggest change for you mentally? Because I know you wanted to talk about the psychology of unwinding that programming, and clearly it took a while and it took someone to call it out and for you to be in a place to be willing to accept that information and do your own research. But what do you think has been the biggest shift psychologically since you've made that connection of, yes, it was a high control group and it was harmful?
My whole life, I've been blaming myself for everything. Anything bad that happened to me, any struggle that I had, anything and everything was my own fault. And that was how I was conditioned to think. It's not a healthy way to think. It's not an effective way to think. It's not helpful. It just paralyzes you. Once I was able to see things for what they were, I was able to let so much of that go. And suddenly I was just lighter. And that just, it's affected my life in so many ways. I'm really good with my kids, I don't put that kind of pressure on my kids. I'm very gentle with them. And they're fantastic, and they listen to me, which is proof that you don't have to punish kids excessively to get them to listen to you. Just understand them.
Yeah.
Love them. I'm able to work and write and do the things that I like to do without feeling like I'm supposed to be doing something else, which is another piece of it. Is like, I should be at the Kingdom Hall. I should be preaching. I should be, all these other things. Like, this is what I should be doing. I don't feel that weight anymore. There are so many things that I've just been able to let go of. And that is everything when it comes to healing, just to let that weight go.
It's an undescribable sense of peace once you get to the point of like you were saying, the awareness, but also letting go of that stuff, the guilt and the shame, because that stays for a while. Even when I found out Mormonism was made up, and I was like, oh, this guy just made a bunch of stuff up and we followed it for whatever reason, there's still that underlying, but what if I'm wrong? What if I turned away from the one true religion that I was so lucky to be born into? You know, the feelings of, oh man, I
Yeah.
don't want to be wrong about this, because I had so many spiritual experiences and testimony building experiences that I knew that was a true church. And so it takes a lot to be able to see things differently and be like, oh, it's fine. Everything's going to be fine. You're
Right.
not going to
Right.
outer
And,
darkness, and I can just be at peace with that.
and similarly, I mean, I always had this lingering feeling, just like back here. What if they're right? What if I'm going to die at Armageddon? What if my kids won't be in paradise? What if, what if? Letting that go, goodness, so much better.
Yeah.
And my kids ask me questions like, what happens when we die? Kids love to ask heavy questions. And, well, this is what this group of people believes. This is what this group of people believes. This is what your Nana and Poppy believe. I honestly don't know. But it's okay to believe whatever you want to believe as long as you treat other people kindly. And that's just that's my approach. And they handle it well. And they're wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like I'm doing something okay, I guess.
Yeah. And what brings you happiness and joy and peace now, aside from knowing that you're fine and Armageddon's not gonna hopefully happen?
I write a lot of poetry. I read. I hang out with my kids. I work as a data analyst. I have a lot of stuff going on. I stay busy and I'm happy and life's pretty good. I've just laid back and just hang out, No, nothing nothing too incredibly interesting, but I'm happy.
Yeah.
And that's so much more that I could say than I've ever felt, I guess.
I think there's a real beauty in the mundane after coming from a high control group where we feel like we should be busy because we were always kept busy and always expected to do all these extra things. And it's so nice to just not do any of that and just to enjoy the simple things in life. It doesn't have to be crazy. Just sitting in front of the TV sometimes is like, oh, this is nice. I'm just relaxing and watching trash TV.
And not feeling bad about it.
Yeah. Just allowing yourself
Yeah.
to exist is such a wonderful feeling without all of these extra pressures, because life is hard enough, right? And then you layer on all of these things that they tell you you're supposed to be doing, or else your salvation hangs in the balance. And at any time, someone's going to come and clip the string and you're going to fall into outer darkness or hell or Armageddon or whatever it is. It's like sometimes it's just nice to just relax and just exist.
Yes, whatever happens is going to happen. If there is a God, hopefully God can see I'm a good person.
Yeah.
If he can't, we have some issues.
Yeah, that's my thing too when it comes to religion. People are like, well, what if you're wrong? I'm like, well, if God truly looks at my life and sees the things that I've done as being right in line with the murderers and all of the people that are that most people can say, well, you're not going to heaven. If he thinks that I'm in line with those type of people, then I probably don't want to be in heaven anyway, because that sounds like a God I don't want to follow.
Agreed.
Yeah.
On the same page, yes.
Well, this has been great. I'm so glad you decided to submit and come on and share your story. How do you feel after getting all of that out?
I feel good. I've never told it beginning to end, so thank you for allowing me the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, of course. And just for my own curiosity, because this happened in 2020, the deconstruction process officially. So it's been a few years. Do you still find that you gain inspiration or comfort in watching other survivor stories? I know clearly you found our channel and you decided to come on it, but how much is that still a part of your daily life, weekly life, monthly life of deconstruction and watching other survivors?
Early on, I obsessively watched everything I could get my hands on, but pretty much. I watched it all the time, just trying to absorb all the information I could, trying to hear all kinds of different perspectives, trying to see versions of myself, trying to see what other people maybe went through that was different. And that was very much a part of my existence for a couple of years. But eventually I got to a place where I still watch, but I usually watch content from other high control groups. I don't really watch Jehovah's Witness content anymore. I'm not completely sure why that is. I wouldn't say that it's triggering. I just don't really find a lot of it very helpful for me anymore. And I think it's just because a lot of it is coming from a place of anger, which I'm not there anymore. I do like particularly ex-Mormon content. I love. I don't know why, but I do.
Because we're sister cults or cousin cults.
I find ex-Mormons delightful. And so I do watch a lot of ex-Mormon content, but it's not a part of my daily life anymore, but I do watch it. I don't actually turn my TV on all that much. I prefer to read. I do still engage with it, just not as much. I will occasionally dip my toe into ex-Jehovah's Witness content if there's something big happening in that world, just to keep myself informed.
Mhm.
But otherwise, no, I don't generally watch it anymore.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you that. I don't think I've asked anyone that on the show before, but I do think it's interesting because some people, like you were saying, and I think this is a lot of us, I did it too, where you binge everything and then there comes a point where you're like, I don't think I need to do this anymore. And some people feel like they shouldn't feel that way, or like, is there something wrong with me for not wanting to watch it anymore? But I think it's a totally normal progression of going through all those emotions and wanting to feel validation through other people's stories, wanting to be informed, wanting to be educated about certain topics, especially your own group that you came from. And then there's a moment where it's like, it feels good to move on, and then maybe you might revisit it. It was actually Owen with Telltale Atheist that came on and told me, and it was the first time I had even considered it. It was early in the C2C days. He was like, yeah, I have a lot of subscribers, but sometimes the numbers dip and then they go back up and then they dip and they go back up. And it's me just realizing that I was an integral part of someone's journey until I wasn't anymore. And that's okay, because not everyone is going to watch always. They may be okay with just getting a certain bit of information and then moving on.
Yeah. And also, I did want to clarify. I did say a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witness content comes from a place of anger. I want to clarify that it's absolutely okay and appropriate to be angry.
Yeah.
I just moved beyond that, so if that anger doesn't resonate with me anymore.
Yeah.
But they absolutely have the right to be angry. I just wanted to be clear. I didn't want to make it seem like I didn't think that.
No, that's a good distinction. And I think there are a variety of creators that come from different emotional standpoints. I still come out a little bitter, and I'm very clear about that. Like, yeah, sometimes I'm still bitter about Mormonism, but I'm not necessarily angry anymore until I hear of the cases where they're actively harming children or allowing children to be harmed and protecting the predators. Then you'll see me get angry and feisty.
Yeah.
But for the most
Yeah.
part, I feel like I understand that everyone from that system is working from a place of programming and things that they grew up learning, and they're just perpetuating that generation after generation, and that just creates a system, not necessarily even the people at the top running the system, but it creates a system where people are trapped and harmed, and ultimately it's not healthy for everybody. It might be healthy for some if they fit that little mold that they make you fit into, but for a lot of people it's not healthy. So I try to remain balanced with my opinions when it comes to Mormonism, but you will see the sass come out every now and then.
Oh, I like the sass. Yeah, I do like the sass. It's fine. And I get sassy too sometimes because there are things about it that's not okay, man. You can't do that to people.
Yeah.
But I don't stay actively angry anymore because it's just I'm not, like I said, I'm not an angry person, and I don't like to be angry. It doesn't make me feel good, so I'd rather just let it go as much as I can, and I think I've done a pretty good job.
Do you have enough sass for a Linda Listen moment? Or did you want to go inspirational?
I don't know if I have sass, but I do have my Linda Listen.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right. Well, Linda Listen. The thing I wish someone had told me when I was a young woman sitting in that judicial committee is that I mattered, not as a label on a file, not as someone's reputation to protect, and not someone whose job it was to obey. I mattered as a person. If anyone listening is sitting in the same kind of silence where they're being told who they are or what they're worth, I want them to know something that I didn't know for a very long time. You matter.
That's so beautiful. That may have got me choked up a little bit, but maybe I'm just too pregnant. But also, I guess that just hits home to, again, sister cults having to go in and explain your worth or get the approval of some random guy to tell you that you're worthy when you are inherently worthy. Everyone has worth and value. And you're absolutely right. I wish these organizations that claim to be the closest to God would actually act godly and Christ-like and extend a hand and extend love and grace and forgiveness, not because you've checked all of the boxes, but just because you're a person who needs help. So I agree with that.
Pregnancy brain is real. I understand.
Pregnancy brain and pregnancy emotions. I'm like, oh, everything makes me cry.
I get it.
Oh my goodness. Thank you again, Meg, for coming on and sharing. Did you want to leave any social media handles or are you going to stay pretty anonymous? Either way is fine.
Oh yeah, I'm not incredibly active on social. You can find me on Instagram. My handle is Meg Reads and Reads. And I have a book of poetry. It's not very good poetry, so don't expect it to be literary.
Don't say that.
Well, look, it's written when I was very young, so my poetry today is better, but it's not published yet.
Okay.
But you can find it on Amazon. It's called Relentless Shadows. I guess that's it.
Okay. Any other final thoughts before we go?
I think we've covered it. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
Yes, of course. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Make sure to leave those words of encouragement down below for Meg, bravely coming on and sharing her story for the first time. It's a big deal. And we really appreciate any way that you can interact with the post, liking, sharing, of course, commenting, subscribing. If you'd like to become a channel member, that is now an option where you can get early release to some of our videos and members only live streams. If you want to support further, we do have a Patreon at patreon.com/cults2consciousness. We have some merch at cults2consciousness.com. If you like this video, I will link 2 more down here below. We have an entire playlist of former Jehovah's Witnesses that you're definitely going to want to check out. And until next time, follow your highest excitement, be conscious, and be well.